We are gathered here today as a community to worship together and to think about our value of compassion. Now, Reverend Anne, I understand that we are going to hear about another special person today. So you talked to us a little while back about who did you talk to us about?
Florence Nightingale.
Florence Nightingale, thank you. And then today you're going to talk to us about Mary Seacole. So I'll pass over to you.
So Florence Nightingale was made very famous because of what she did as a nurse in the Crimea a very long time ago. And this is another woman who also did things in that part of the world at that time. Her name was Mary Seacole. And she was born Mary Jane Grant on the 23rd of November, 1805. That's about 200 years ago. And she was born in Kingston, Jamaica. Her mother was Jamaican and her father was Scottish. He was an officer in the British Army. Mary's mother was a famous healer in Jamaica. She was like a doctor and nurse rolled into one, and she was called a doctress. And when Mary was young, her mother taught her all her skills. As well as being a doctress, a female doctor curing illnesses with local herbs and medicines and dealing with hygiene, which was very important, Mary was also a businesswoman. In 1836, she married someone called Edwin Seacole, who was a white British merchant from Essex. But sadly, he died a few years later and she never remarried. Although Mary was a very popular doctress, she sadly still experienced racism. People said it was a shame her skin wasn't white, as it would make her more acceptable. Mary couldn't allow this kind of prejudice to be ignored, so she responded that her skin colour made no difference to all the work she did, and that even if her skin had been even darker, she would have been just as happy and just as useful and just as much respected by those whose respect she valued. The Crimean War broke out in October 1853, and the next year Mary had arrived in London to offer her skills as a nurse. Despite all her glowing references from senior officials in Jamaica, Mary was told that all the nursing positions had been filled and that she would not be chosen even if a vacancy came up. But Mary was determined to help the soldiers, so she paid her own way to the Crimea with her friend Thomas Day. They opened the British Hotel, which was a hotel come hospital and store. And it was 2 miles from where the soldiers were stationed in Balaclava in the Crimea. Now, when Mary reached the Crimea, it was cold and smelly, just as she'd been warned, and at times it was very frightening. But she stayed, and with the help of friends in London who loaned her money, she built her hospital, the British Hotel. Every day, her assistants helped her to care for the soldiers. Some were wounded, some were ill, most of them were hungry, and all of them were frightened and far from home. As well as treating soldiers at the British Hotel, Mary would also visit the battlefield on her mule, taking sandwiches, drinks, bandages, and medicines with her. It was a very dangerous thing to do. Mary treated British, French, and other Allied soldiers, but she also tended Russian soldiers who were technically the enemy. One day in 1856, a battle started near the hospital. It was going to be a busy day. They were going to need a lot of hot water and fresh bandages and lots of soup. All day, the guns were busy. All day, they kept bringing in the wounded. But late in the afternoon, there was an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Seacole, I am very honoured to meet you. My name is William Russell. I am a writer for the Times newspaper in London. I have heard so much about your work and I'd like to write about you for my paper. Would you answer some questions? I won't get in the way, I promise. Mary couldn't imagine that anyone in London would be interested in reading about her. The reporter wanted to know why she called the place the British Hotel. Mary told Mr. Russell that she just wanted to make a place where soldiers could come and be safe and warm. It's not the enemy who are killing our soldiers, she said, but disease and cold and lack of proper food. I just try and look after them, and that's why the soldiers call me Mother Seacole. Eventually, the war was over. The Russians and the British agreed to peace. The soldiers packed up to go home, and soon the British hotel was empty. Without a war, it had no purpose. Mary just had to leave it and go back to London. However, she couldn't sell it, and she had no money, and she didn't know how she was going to manage. But then Mr. Russell of the Times tracked her down. He said that the British people would be ashamed if they knew that Mary, who had done so much, should now have so little. Mr. Russell then wrote a story in his newspaper reminding people of Mary's work in the Crimea. Next, he wrote to many of his friends, and they raised money to help her. And some of them organized a huge party to celebrate her work. She thought that no one would come and that she'd been forgotten. But 80,000 people came, including the Lord Mayor of London, who read out a message from Queen Victoria herself, congratulating Mrs. Seacole on her great achievements in the Crimea. Despite being so well loved, Mary was forgotten about in history after her death in 1881. It was only in 1980 that her story was rediscovered, and now a statue of her stands outside St. Thomas's Hospital in London. There's also a blue plaque on the house where she once lived, recording that she was a person of importance in history, and another plaque in the Whittington Hospital in London, which celebrates her nursing work. She was a truly amazing woman. Now I have some reflection questions for you, or some things to think about anyway. Mary lived a long time ago. She's a figure from history. Why is it important to learn about Mary in school these days? How do you think Mary felt when she was turned down from becoming a nurse in Florence Nightingale's hospital? Why do you think she was turned down? Was it fair? What qualities did Mary have that helped her to achieve her ambitions? What do you think we can learn from her life and character? And what do you think of Mr. William Russell? So let's have a prayer. We give thanks for the lives of all those like Mary Seacole, who did so much to help others in a very difficult and dangerous situation. May we learn from her courage, determination, kindness, and true compassion in times of trouble. Help us also in times of trouble and difficulty to be compassionate and peacemakers. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Anne. That was really interesting. What an inspirational lady. And it's amazing that her story has now been shared and found again to be shared with so many other people. Thank you. So you found a good song for us that I know we're going to listen to now. And I think the title is called I'm Black, I'm White, I'm Short, I'm Tall. So enjoy the song. Have a good week, everybody. And we'll see you very soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.